So, hello everyone. Today we're going to train your eye to spot tactical patterns, to detect all of your opponent's weaknesses, and to help you create your first combinations. So how are we going to do this? We'll practice with a series of exercises, often taken from openings, exercises provided by Iches, which come from real games, by the way, played on their gaming platform. Afterwards, we'll also look at the players' levels and whether or not they saw the continuation. And so, in this first position, we have black. And before starting to calculate, you first need to train your eye to spot everything that's wrong in your opponent's position. So what are the criteria? The first criterion is the safety of the king. It's clear that the white king is not safe. It hasn't found shelter. It's still in the center. The second criterion is to spot anything that is insufficiently protected, meaning not protected or barely protected. We can mention the bishop because even though it is protected, it's only just protected. It has only one defender against one attacker. The g3 pawn is not protected, the queen is not protected, the rook isn't either, nor is the bishop, and the c2 pawn isn't protected either. So we can see a whole lot of lack of protection on the opponent's side. Next, we need to look at the alignments. So there's the queen-king alignment, of course, which pins the bishop. But there's also the rook-queen alignment, which could allow for a discovered attack by the bishop. I think we've identified pretty much everything there was to spot. You see, it's important, even when you're practicing with a tactical exercise, to do what I just did before you start calculating. And so, to do this, you can use the right mouse button and click on everything that is insufficiently protected and draw arrows to show, for example, the alignments. Once you've done that, your eye gradually gets used to, as you do more exercises, spotting everything that's off visually, and when you're playing your own games, it will flash before your eyes. You'll see everything that's insufficiently protected flashing in the position, and all the alignments will flash as well. And these will alert you to a possible danger or a possible combination. So once you've identified all the problems in your opponent's position, you need to start calculating. And here, you have to respect the order of calculations. Check, capture, threat. I know there are some people who immediately want to play bishop h3, which is a threat, threatening to do so. Threatening queen prom fou mate and threatening to win the queen. But be careful, you actually need to start your calculations with checks, and I'll explain why. So in this position, what checks do we have? We have queen prom fou check. It's an attraction sacrifice. It pulls the king onto this white square. And now we can play bishop h3 check and then capture the queen by attacking the knight. So we will have lost our queen, but we will have won the white queen plus the bishop on f1. We will have won a piece, a material gain. And that's the correct sequence. Because if you start by creating threats, be careful. Threats are less forcing than checks. Immediately. If we play bishop h3, the threats are terrible. We threaten queen takes bishop mate and rook takes queen. But it's the opponent's turn to play. And they might be able to take the initiative by giving checks. And actually, queen takes f7, that's going to be mate. We're going to get checkmated here with queen takes f7. And even after bishop h3, even if white didn't have queen takes f7, they could play queen b5 check or go back to c4 to defend the bishop. So there would be ways for white not to lose the piece. But obviously, they're going to checkmate on f7. So the correct sequence here is to do queen takes bishop. The computer confirms it, king takes, then bishop h3 check and rook takes queen. So this is a game that was played between players rated over 1500. You see both over 1550 in a 10-minute game. We're going to realize now. Did the player with black find this sequence? So after queen takes d5, did black find it? No, they did not find it. They played bishop e6. They attacked the queen, but now the queen can escape, even giving checks to the king. On c6 or b5, for example. So he didn't find queen takes bishop. He didn't find how to win the piece. If he had played bishop h3, you see there is queen takes f7, mate. Immediately. And even if white doesn't checkmate, as I told you, they can play, for example, queen b5 check. And black never wins a piece in this sequence. So spotting problems in your opponent's position is good, but you also need to get used to having a good calculation order. That doesn't mean threats will never work, but when you make threats, you have to understand that you give your opponent more moves to defend themselves and even to counterattack you. All right, new exercise. We're going to keep training our eye to spot visual tactical patterns. In this position, white have just played rook to h5. So what should we be looking for? First, you need to notice that the white king is not completely safe. You could even say it's in danger here. Let's also notice the false opposition of the king and the pin of the knight. And what is insufficiently protected on the opponent's side. There's the knight on d4, which is insufficiently protected, of course. We can also notice, and I hadn't mentioned it yet, the alignment between the rook and the queen. So, of course, there are a lot of pieces in between, but sometimes in tactical sequences, there are forced moves that end up clearing the alignments that seemed very blocked. So those are pretty much all the problems for white. We can notice that the rook on A is unprotected. Well, here, I think that won't have any impact on the combination. But sometimes we're very surprised that an unprotected piece on the other side of the board can sometimes make certain combinations possible. So we've identified pretty much everything that's wrong with white. Now we need to structure our calculation. So how do we structure it? Check, capture, threat. What checks do I have? Bishop takes knight, check, pawn takes. After that, my queen is still under attack. She doesn't have many good options, so I don't see it. What other checks do we have? We have checks with the queen, of course, on h1, e1, f2, and h2. All these checks give away the queen for nothing. But sometimes giving up the queen, which seems like a totally stupid move, can turn out to be a brilliant one. So you have to consider it. After all, if the move is bad, you don't even waste half a second seeing it. It's very clear here that queen h1 is bad. But sometimes by looking at moves that seem completely bad, you might have a breakthrough and realize that a queen sacrifice is winning. So in this square, I didn't have a breakthrough. The queen sacrifices really seem stupid to me this time. So now let's look at the captures. If none of the checks work, we'll look at the captures. I'll look at threats last. So for the captures, I'm looking at rook takes knight. Sure, it doesn't give check, but it's still a capture, so it could be interesting. If white recapture, bishop takes check. The king is forced to go to f1, and we have queen f2, mate. So on rook takes d4, white can't recapture with the pawn. But they might take our queen, and there our rook can leave, delivering a check. For example, rook takes bishop with check, and afterwards we can grab the queen. And it's true that we'll have lost our queen, but we'll have taken a knight, a bishop, and a queen. So it's terrible. It's really rook takes knight here. Since the checks don't work, we're interested in the captures. All right, rook takes knight. He takes the queen. Rook takes bishop, check, and we take the queen. And we've wiped out white's position. This is a game between players rated between 1700 and 1800 with 16 minutes plus 8 seconds per move. So it's actually quite a slow game. Let's see if the player with black found the sequence. And so on the queen, h4, there was a rook h5, and did the player... No, the player with black didn't find it. He played it. Queen f6. And yet you see, the player had plenty of time with black. He was ranked 1800. So on the one hand, player 1711 let this opportunity come against him, but player 1800 did not take advantage of it. He played queen f6. And for what it's worth, he actually ended up losing that game because in the position, he still has one less piece. When you look at it, he has one less knight. All right, new exercise. Black have just captured on d6. So again, you need to spot the visual tactical patterns and only after that, organize your calculation order. In any square, a combination that you didn't find, it's either because there were visual patterns you hadn't identified and so you couldn't use them, or the calculation order was not properly followed. So it's important actually when you miss a combination not to immediately click the next button to go do another combination. No, take the time to try to understand why you missed it, which sequences slipped past you, but above all to spot them. Which visual patterns you hadn't identified, for example, an unprotected piece or a poorly exploited opposition. And then if you had correctly spotted all the visual patterns, you need to try to ask yourself. The question is, did you organize your calculation order properly? Maybe you played the second move before the first. You played a simple capture or a simple threat before a check, for example. So you need to visually identify everything that causes problems for your opponent and then properly organize your calculation order. So here I'm working on visual identification. Once again, I'm going to use the right click on the mouse, which you can use on all playing areas to identify and train your eye to spot everything that's wrong. So here in this position, of course, the black king also doesn't seem to be completely safe. There's the pawn, which is unprotected and can be captured with check, so that's something to watch for. There's also this rook, which isn't so well protected. Granted, it's protected twice, but after all, it's also attacked twice. So if either of the two black pieces were diverted, the rook would ultimately no longer be sufficiently protected. The e3 pawn is unprotected, the bishop as well, the queen too, and the rook as well. So we notice quite a few things. Now we need to structure our calculation order. Check, capture, threat. So if I play knight takes pawn, I give check, the king moves to b8. What can I do next? I can take the rook, the bishop recaptures, I can recapture giving check, but the king escapes by taking my knight, and in the end I've lost material for nothing. So knight takes a7. I'm not convinced that works. Queen takes rook. Bishop recaptures. The square d6. Knight d6 check. The king moves, knight takes queen with the attack from the rook, which is trapped, and you see, I'm discovering this exercise at the same time as you. I'm figuring it out right now. And I didn't have the sequence right away. With queen takes rook. It was only after seeing the deflection of the bishop that I realized a new check was available for white. So queen takes, rook, bishop takes, knight d6. And this check is interesting because afterwards you take the queen, the rook is trapped, and the bishop is itself under attack. It's a game between players. At 1800 and 1900, well, 1888 with white and 1916 with black in a 10-minute game. Did the player with white find it? So after knight b5, the player with black captured on e3, and the player with white did not find it. You see, he played knight takes a7, a move we had looked at, but it's not enough. Knight a7, the king can come to b8, and there isn't really any follow-up. New exercise, white play knight to a3. So once again, let's identify what's wrong with white. The white king has found shelter, but be careful, the first rank catches my eye. There could be some back rank mate ideas because, of course, I see the alignment of the rook and the queen against the d1 rook, which is insufficiently protected. The queen isn't protected either. The rook on a1 isn't protected either. There we go. I think we've identified everything that's wrong with white. And now we're going to start organizing our calculation order. Check, capture, threat. So there are no checks. So we'll definitely look at the captures here. So what captures do we have? Well, the capture on c3 could be interesting because we attack the queen. We create a fork between the queen and the rook. So if we take on c3 and the pawn recaptures, we'll take the rook on d1. That's very interesting. And after knight takes c3, if he takes our queen, we take his queen with check before taking his rook. So we're going to win. A bit of material, a pawn, and an exchange, I think. So let's go for it. Knight takes c3, he takes the queen. We take the queen with check. The king moves, for example, he comes to f1. We take on d7, he can take on e2. And here we've clearly won a pawn. We have one more pawn, the c pawn, and the exchange. Meaning we have two rooks and the opponent will have one rook and a minor piece. Look at the players. They're both rated over 2,300. It was a 3-minute game, so a very short game. And let's see what the player with black found in the sequence. So on rook d8, white played knight a3, and the player with black did not find the sequence. Look, he played knight f4. In addition, the bishop takes and will allow the rook a1 to defend the rook d1. So not only did the player with black, who is rated over 2,300, not find the right move, but on top of that, he played a losing move. Because now white take and will have won a piece by connecting the rooks and attacking the queen. Come on, let's practice one more time. The bishop comes to e6. What do we notice? The black king hasn't left the center yet, so he's not completely safe, especially since I realized that the bishop on e6 isn't well protected. If there are captures on e6 and a pawn recaptures, it will open up this diagonal. There's also this diagonal that's open. The knight is unprotected. Both rooks, as usual when you haven't castled, are often unprotected as well. So there are quite a few problems for black. Now it's not enough just to identify the problems. You also have to organize your calculation order properly. Check, capture, threat. The check on b5 is going to play a role. Bishop d7. And if I take his bishop or his knight in any square, he always takes back. So the checks don't seem to work. I'll look at the captures. Of course, there's this capture on e6 with the bishop or the knight. I'll look at the bishop first. I like to keep the knight for possible forks that might come up later. So bishop takes, pawn takes. The knight is often a richer piece tactically. So what can I do? Knight takes, I attack his queen. I attack the pawn on g7. I attack the pawn on c7. I'm attacking a lot of things. But is that enough? Bishop takes, pawn takes, knight takes. If he plays, for example, queen e7, my knight can't actually take anything. So it doesn't seem all that interesting. And if I do the opposite, knight takes, bishop, pawn takes, now he no longer has his bishop. So we can play bishop b5. Check. Take advantage of the open diagonal towards his king and grab his knight because he no longer has the defensive return of the bishop on d7. So that's it. It's knight takes, pawn takes. And the check as a follow-up, which allows you to win the knight. So the players were rated over 1,600 in 10 minutes plus 5 seconds. Let's go right away and see if the move was spotted with white. So bishop e6, the mistake by black, which loses a piece. Do white take advantage of it? They do well. The knight takes the piece, the pawn captures back, and then we see what follows. They miss bb5. They're going to play bishop takes e6. They miss bishop b5. They could have won the piece, but actually they play bishop takes e6. And then queen e7 is played, and the game continues. Black avoided the worst. They avoided losing the piece. So white didn't actually see the capture on b5. They simply thought about winning a pawn in reality. They win a pawn. They want to have a bishop on the diagonal to make it harder for the king to castle. But they didn't see the move bishop b5. So they didn't take on e6 for the right reason. Now, let's do another exercise. Knight to f3. So what's wrong with white? The f2 pawn, of course, it's attacked twice, but only defended once. So I'm also looking at the h2 pawn. It's attacked twice. Sure, there are two defenders, but if one of the defenders is diverted, like the knight, for example, then it could get interesting. So the king isn't completely safe because of the pressure on f2 and h2. Do we notice anything else? The rook on a1 isn't protected, but obviously in this position it doesn't matter. Our attention is really focused on the king side here. Well, we're going to have to calculate the captures. So let's calculate the captures with check. If I play queen takes f2, check, he goes to h1. And what could I do then? If I play bishop takes h2, if the knight recaptures, knight g3 mate. The problem is that after queen takes f2, check, king h1, bishop takes h2, he doesn't have to take with the knight, he could even maybe take with the king. And that's a whole different story. So in the end, I'm interested in playing bishop takes h2 check, maybe first. He'll be forced to take because if he goes to h1, queen takes f2 mate. So bishop takes h2, check. If he takes with the knight, queen takes f2 check, king to h1, and now klg3 mate. We will have forced the capture on h2 by the knight. So bishop h2, check, what does he have left? He has king left. h1, that's the last move we haven't calculated. But king h1, knight takes f2 mate. So here, the correct sequence is not to start with queen f2. It looks tempting, but it doesn't work. You have to start with bishop h2. You see, here there are a lot of players who, in games or in exercises, would suggest queen f2. But no, it's bishop h2 first. Knight takes, queen f2 now, and knight g3 mate. Because if we do the opposite, queen f2, king h1, and if we do bishop h2, of course, if he takes with the knight, we will have mate. But he is not obliged to take with the knight. He can play another move. He can even, in fact, the computer indicates it, he can even take our own knight. That way, we won't be able to have the queen and knight tandem at all to try to checkmate. So let's see now if the player with black saw this sequence. It's a 3-minute game, so they didn't have much time. But these two players are over 1900. And after all, we're still in the opening. It's only the 11th move. So even in a 3-minute game, by the 11th move, you still have a little bit of time. So I'm watching. So queen to h4 was played. What did white play? So they played knight to f3. Did the player with black see it? No. Look, he went back to f6. He missed the mate in a few moves here, in 3 moves. So you see, it's still interesting to spot these combinational patterns. Train your eye to recognize tactical motifs. That's why when you're on a playing site and practicing with a computer, you can, with tactical exercises, use the right click to highlight the squares, draw arrows. That way your eye gets used to detecting them. Visually, everything that's not right. And I'm telling you, in your own games, it will start to flash as you gradually automate this process. But once you've identified everything that's wrong with your opponent's position, you need to structure your calculation and always prioritize checks. And only if the checks don't work do you look at captures or threats. There you go. I hope you found this video helpful. That's what I use anyway. I'm not a very tactical player. I don't necessarily have a great interest in tactical games. I am quite passionate about strategy in chess. But anyway, without tactics, we are frustrated players because we can understand a position, we can dominate and not finish. So you still have to practice tactics, of course. And there you go. You can leave me likes, comments, share the video, and support the channel. And we'll meet again soon for more adventures on the chessboard, games, or other training sessions. Goodbye, everyone.